They had discovered the highest tomb on Earth.
When she first came out of the ground, she was completely wrapped up. We couldn't see any part of her body.
She sits curled in the cold, her knees drawn gently to her chest, hair braided tightly as if someone had just finished preparing her for a journey. But this journey was meant to end, not begin. 5 centuries later, found near the summit of a silent volcano, her body was almost perfect, peaceful, untouched, and impossibly intact. What began as the search for an ancient sacrifice would lead scientists into a far stranger revelation, one that linked her lungs to a medical mystery no one saw coming. The Peak of Silence. In March of 1999, on the upper slopes of Mount Llullaillaco, the wind howled like it had for centuries, scattering fine volcanic dust across jagged stone. Johan Reinhard and his team of high-altitude archaeologists moved slowly, deliberately, each breath a struggle in the thin air above 22,000 feet. They weren't climbing for sport. They were searching for history, guided by the belief that ancient civilizations had once come here not to conquer nature, but to leave something behind. What they uncovered, buried in a stone-covered tomb near the summit, would soon be called the best-preserved mummy ever found. Seated in a small ceremonial chamber, carved into the mountain itself, was a young girl, perfectly frozen. Her skin still bore the blush of life, her clothes lay unwrinkled, and her face, peaceful, almost serene, looked more asleep than dead. Next to her were finely crafted textiles, ceramic vessels, and figurines, offerings carefully arranged centuries ago. Unlike the dry skeletal remains typical of Andean mummies, this body retained moisture and flesh. Her internal organs, stomach contents, and even the bacteria in her lungs had been locked in stasis by the cold and low oxygen. It wasn't just a body, it was a moment, paused, and with it came questions no one on that mountain could yet answer. Who was she? How had she died? And what secret had the mountain preserved so perfectly? The Girl from the Sun Empire. To understand how a teenage girl ended her life on a frozen volcano, investigators first had to trace where her life began. Scientific analysis of her clothing, burial objects, and physical development revealed that she was around 14 years old at the time of her death. But her possessions told a far richer story than her age alone, pointing unmistakably toward the heart of the Inca Empire. The finely woven textiles buried with her matched styles produced for Inca nobility, fabrics reserved for the elite and often controlled directly by the state. Pottery recovered from her tomb bore designs linked to Cusco, the imperial capital, a city that once governed an empire stretching more than 2,500 miles along the spine of South America. Isotope analysis of her hair confirmed she had grown up eating foods typical of the highlands near Cusco, strengthening the case that she was not a provincial child, but someone raised close to power. Yet her life took a sharp turn roughly a year before her death. Chemical markers in her hair showed a dramatic shift in diet, from simple regional foods to maize and dried meat consumed by pilgrims and elites traveling long distances. This change suggests she was selected for a sacred role and removed from her family, a fate recorded in Spanish chronicles describing children chosen for religious service. Within the empire, these girls were known as the Virgins of the Sun. They lived secluded lives, trained for ritual purity, and were believed to stand closer to the gods than ordinary people. Treated with reverence and fear, they were honored in public while being quietly prepared for a destiny that allowed no return. Her long journey across deserts and mountains was not a test of endurance, but a procession towards something far more final: bloodless death. Despite her exceptional preservation, the maiden revealed no signs of violence. Her face was composed, her body intact, and there were no cuts, bruises, or broken bones to suggest a painful end. This absence of trauma only deepened the mystery. How does someone die so high on a mountain with no visible wounds and remain nearly perfect for 5 centuries? The answer, scientists believed, might lie inside her. The team transported her carefully, encased in a mobile freezer, to a CT scanner at a local hospital, making her the oldest patient ever to pass through its doors. Imaging revealed undisturbed organs and no internal bleeding. Her stomach still contained remnants of her final meal: vegetables, corn, and llama jerky, typical Inca foods. This suggested she was conscious not long before she died. Hair samples told a more detailed story. Forensic toxicologists discovered high levels of coca alkaloids and ethanol, derived from coca leaves and chicha, a fermented corn beer. Both were known to dull pain and induce a dreamlike state. These substances, administered over several months, appeared to have intensified in the weeks leading up to her death, peaking just before the final ascent. There were other hints too: red pigment painted on her cheeks, the bulge of chewed coca in her mouth, and vomit staining her lips. Her tight braids had been freshly done, perhaps only hours before her final breath. And finally, there was the burial shroud, a thick woolen cloth wrapped around her head and knotted at the back. There were no signs of suffocation trauma, but it would have been enough to gently smother her if she were already sedated or slipping into unconsciousness. These clues converged into a picture of deliberate, ceremonial death. The maiden had not died by accident, nor in haste. She was led, prepared, and ultimately offered in a ritual where peace was mandatory and pain unspoken. Time capsules in her lungs. 8 years after her discovery, the maiden revealed something no one could have predicted. In 2007, a team of microbiologists conducting non-invasive sampling on her preserved remains made a startling find. Her lungs still contained living bacteria. Not remnants, not fossilized traces. Living microbes that had somehow survived 500 years locked in ice and time. But the true surprise came when those bacteria were cultured in a lab. One strain, recovered from her lung tissue, showed resistance to multiple modern antibiotics, including some that had only been developed in the past century. This wasn't contamination. The bacterial DNA matched no known hospital-borne pathogens. It was unmistakably a pre-antibiotic era microbe that had naturally evolved defenses long before penicillin was even discovered. That discovery upended a core assumption in medical science, that antibiotic resistance was largely a modern phenomenon, driven by pharmaceutical overuse. Here was a silent, frozen counter-argument, a 500-year-old bacterium that had evolved resistance in complete isolation, untouched by human medicine. It suggested that nature itself, given enough time and pressure, could develop defense mechanisms entirely on its own. For researchers, the maiden became more than an archaeological marvel. She became a microbial time capsule. Her lungs offered a snapshot of an ancient microbiome, one that had coexisted with Inca humans in ways we still don't fully understand. The implications rippled across disciplines, from archaeology to epidemiology, reframing how we understand disease evolution, microbial survival, and even the risks hidden in melting permafrost today. She had been buried to honor the gods, but in preserving her, the gods may have also preserved something far more profound: microscopic life, quietly surviving alongside her sacrifice. Offerings to the sky. To modern eyes, the idea of sacrificing a child, especially one so revered, seems unthinkable. But within the worldview of the Inca, death atop a mountain was not a tragedy. It was transcendence. The maiden's journey mirrored a sacred tradition known as Capacocha, a ceremony reserved for the empire's most important offerings. Children chosen for this ritual were believed to be the purest connection between the human world and the divine. Mountains were not just geographic features in Inca cosmology. They were apus, living spirits, guardians of water and weather. And Llullaillaco, being the highest active volcano in the world, was among the most sacred. When the Inca Empire faced drought, disaster, or leadership transitions, priests would ascend such peaks to make ritual offerings. These weren't random sacrifices. They were carefully orchestrated, spiritually charged events. Selected children like the maiden were raised in seclusion and ritual cleanliness, often for years before their final pilgrimage. They were celebrated in Cusco, showered with finery, and sent on their journey accompanied by priests and sometimes even family. Chroniclers of the Spanish conquest later wrote that families of these children were honored, not condemned. The children, they believed, would live on with the gods, immortal, exalted. Modern shamans like Pumaquispe, a descendant of Inca spiritual lineage, still ascend the Andes to leave offerings. Coca leaves, alcohol, and small figurines, echoes of a ritual that never fully disappeared. To them, the mountain is still sacred, and the maiden remains part of that sacred memory. Her burial wasn't a loss, it was a union with something greater. And so, while science peeled back the layers of her death, Inca tradition had long believed she hadn't died at all. She had simply changed form, becoming part of the mountain, the sky, and the world she was meant to protect. What she left behind. Today, the maiden rests in the Museum of High Altitude Archaeology in Salta, Argentina, preserved in a cryogenic chamber that mirrors the cold of the mountain where she was found. Visitors walk through hushed halls to see her small form, seated behind glass, her braids still coiled, her expression still calm. But even in this carefully controlled environment, she stirs strong reactions. Some see beauty in her stillness. Others feel an unease that doesn't quite fade when they leave. Ethical debates continue. Is it right to display the body of a child, even one buried 5 centuries ago with ceremonial intent? Does preserving her in a museum honor her sacrifice, or does it reframe it through a modern lens she never consented to? There are no easy answers, only the weight of history suspended in time. And yet, her presence carries meaning. She is a bridge between worlds, the spiritual and the scientific, the ancient and the emerging. Her story is not just one of death, but of extraordinary preservation, ritual purpose, and biological revelation. In giving herself to the gods, she unknowingly gave us a chance to understand something far bigger: how belief, culture, and nature intertwine in ways that still defy easy explanation. She was meant to disappear into legend, sealed in ice atop the world. Instead, she returned with a whisper from the past, and bacteria that outlived empires. So, what else lies buried in time? Drop your thoughts below, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next story.